Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to welcome Professor Narayanamurti. And Dean left just in time, so he doesn't have difficulty pronouncing his name. And I was, I was assigned the responsibility to welcome here. If I were to give you all the details about him, I will be giving the lecture and you won't be able to hear him. But I will just highlight a few things. Those who are familiar with the quantum Hall effect and getting a Nobel Prize for Bell Lab scientists, that work was done in Venky's lab at Bell Labs in Murray Hill. That's one of the highlights. And the second one is he created a competitive school to us, engineering school at Santa Barbara. If he had come here, maybe it will be a different situation. But he built up Santa Barbara engineering. The two people, Moravian and then Venky, built up Santa Barbara into a top-notch, one of the top-notch schools, engineering schools in the country. And that's not in a small task. He didn't sit on his laurels of Santa Barbara. Then they attracted him to Harvard. Harvard didn't have an engineering school. They used to call Division of Engineering and Applied Science. And Venky put full effort in converting into School of Engineering and Applied Science. It became a school, just like arts and other features at Harvard. And that's to change the culture at Harvard is not trivial, because it's set for 400 or 300 years. And they don't want to change. They think they all know what to do. Now, he's a member of NAE, but even better is a foreign secretary of NAE. He can travel to all the possible countries wherever he decides to liaison with. And he just told me in the next 2 weeks he'll be going to China, India, and somewhere else. And it's difficult to keep up with it. With that brief introduction, I would like him to come and deliver the lecture on engineering education in the 21st century. This is his new love.
Well, thank you very much, Subhash. It really is nice to be here. And I didn't realize there were so many former Bell Labs colleagues here. And it's sort of, in a sense, when you get to my age, there is a time of remembrances of what great things are. And I asked Subhash what would he said, talk about engineering education. And especially while I was creating the School of Engineering at Harvard, and even at Santa Barbara, I really got really interested in that subject. I chaired the engineering advisory board for the NSF. And one of the dreaded things as engineering dean, even at Santa Barbara, was the ABET reviews. And God knows in the 90s, so many box checking. I never grew up in the world of box checking. Even the US Department of Energy was better. And they would check the boxes. And unless you train engineers in that way, God, you didn't get accredited. That taught me quite a lesson, actually. And I always felt I was a great believer in liberal education. I went to an undergraduate college in India called St. Stephen's College, which was generally where there were physicists who also debated and did all the other things, and they were just not the physics nerds. So I always was on a kick to change the view of scientists, engineers as just being nerds, but something more and bigger than that. And that was my mantra even for when Harvard came. And Santa Barbara for me is a wonderful place. And the reason it is so good also is not because it's always the people. And it was flexible enough to recruit, both in the College of Engineering and in the physics department, people who may not either have a physics degree or in engineering might not have an engineering degree, but rather came from industry. And for example, the physics department hired a person by the name of Fred Woodall, who's a chemist, materials chemist, actually chemist. And the chemistry department was quite insular, like most academic departments. The physics department hired him and Alan Heeger. And Alan Heeger, of course, also became professor of materials. And only much later that did even NAS and others recognize that he had done something good. And so it was a culture. And Santa Barbara had lots of people, not just from Bell Labs, but also from IBM and from Exxon, etc. Because somehow when you grow up from the industrial lab culture, you sort of grow up with not whether you're a physicist or an engineer, what is the most exciting problem to solve. So people had lots of joint appointments and etc. So I think that's part of the aspect. And I give several other kinds of lectures because I think national science and technology policy, which is really the thing which I'm working on, really needs to change a lot because in fact engineering and technology have been not properly recognized. And some of the fault are the engineers and technologists because we did not take the kind of visionary approach. Bell Labs for me was not just a place of physics, was a place of creative technology, which are always involved physics, engineering, material science, and all kinds of interesting things happen because you were always told to look at something which is unknown. So what I want to talk about, and I've also been chairing some other committees where nationally I've noticed in biology, they are even more stovepipe than in engineering or in physics. And that's a very serious issue because in fact, if you look at biology, in fact, that is the way I convinced Larry Summers. I had to actually convince not only a lot of arts and science faculty and humanists, Larry Summers was really a tough boss to convert. And I'll come back to that, a little history, because it's important, because he said, Venky, anyway, you might be Bell Labs, information computers of the past, Stanford has done it now, Silicon Valley is there, now is the time for life sciences, and Harvard and Boston will be the place for life sciences in the world. I told him, Mr. President, unless you have a great school of engineering, you'll never succeed, because in fact, you will need physics, you will need computer science, you need electrical engineering, and unless they'll all go to MIT and they will not come to Harvard. In fact, I showed him how, and I'll show you some examples of. Huh? No, in fairness to him, because of my Bell Labs past, I was able to argue with him and actually succeed. So what I want to talk about is really a little bit even how universities must change. And I will start mostly with engineering simply because I was dean for many years and I had to also have the rationale for creating. So the 2 points which I want to address, sorry, I don't know what I did. I pressed the top. I pressed the top button. The front, the main got blank. Yes.
Where did
This go? So I can see on this side, but this disappeared. I pressed this by mistake.
it says go this way?
Yeah, good. Hurrah. Thank you. So what does it mean to be leading a society-relevant university in an increasingly globalized world? And what does it mean to be a broadly educated person in the 21st century? I actually think this last question was actually attracted me to Harvard because that was the part of the idea of the liberal education, both because of my own undergraduate and then the role of technology. And so that's what I want to talk about. So I want to actually go a little more into detail really about the issue that the engineering is a very important linking discipline, both to the world of science and to the world of technology and society, and as a source of innovation in the economy. So it's a very central element. And of course, University of California has known that for 150 years, land-grant universities. But there were a whole bunch of, including University of Chicago, where I think Tony Tyson did his PhD, didn't have any engineering school. Hannah Gray, president, was on my board, at the board of trustees. They're now, University of Chicago is also creating engineering. In fact, my successor at Santa Barbara, Matt Turrell, is now there because suddenly they all realized. And that, in fact, they were so. And really, what I want to talk about, engineering education itself needed to change and think of engineering education as a liberal art. That really is important in a simplistic sense. To do engineering, you need to know physics, you need to know mathematics, chemistry, etc. And then you need to know some economics, you deal with society, you need to know ethics because all kinds of things happen and all of the other features. And in a sense, it is really the ultimate liberal art. And in fact, how we do it really does become important. That's why ABET criteria can be a very serious, limiting, stovepiping nature, just like the biologist and the life scientist. So that's sort of my mantra. I show this mainly, I spent a few minutes on Harvard because really the 10 years of my life went into this. And finally creating a school was not an easy. I believe our British forefathers did many good things. Even in India, they left the civil service, etc. But they also left certain biases and prejudices. And Harvard suffered terribly in the Ivy League schools because engineering was the work of the hand, and somehow we do only the brain things. I actually think engineering, for me, Bell Labs engineering was those guys who invent the transistor, the laser, the CCD, whatever you name it, and all these Nobel Prizes. It's the work of the imagination. Engineering is about imagination and everything, and even the work of the hand happens because of the brain. So this whole rationale of technical work being inferior was totally crazy. But that was the British way. It is really true, and that's true still for Oxford. Cambridge is slightly different. So this is, and there was a whole view. Well, MIT is there. Actually, MIT started because 200 years ago, there were professors who couldn't function at Harvard, and they went and started and got money, and MIT, of course, became a great school of technology and engineering. And anyway, so I do want to spend a few minutes on this because it ultimately relates to the broader question and center. So this is actually Harvard has a very checkered history. Back in 1847, there was this little building called the Lawrence Scientific School. Have any of you been in Massachusetts? There's a town called Lawrence. Lawrence was a great industrialist, and he gave money to Harvard. Many of the sciences and engineering were becoming important. This was in 1847. And in fact, you can't read this very well. It's a New York Tribune. He gave money to Harvard to actually encourage the disciplines of engineering, geophysics, etc. Whereas has presented the sum of $50,000 to the present fellows as an endowment of the scientific school in this university, and for the foundations of professorships of geology and engineering in the same. It is therefore unanimously voted upon, etc. And then what happened, the Faculty of Arts and Sciences took over this money. We don't do engineering, and created the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences with no mention of engineering. It's actually, engineering school actually came before the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. So that's that, because sort of, and we have this continuous history. Then there was another person in 1900 by the name of Gordon McKay. You probably all heard. I went to Harvard as a Gordon McKay, and he was a shoe manufacturer. And he created what you call, made a lot of money during the Civil War in the 1870s, 1880s, because he made automatic shoes, and the soldiers needed these shoes, and he made a lot of money and gave money to Harvard. And actually, when he died much later, that bequest, and he said we should do especially mechanical engineering and the mechanical arts, which is very important. And Harvard wanted to give away that money to MIT and make MIT a division, but it never happened. And in fact, the Harvard faculty said, you want to give that money to MIT? They were the traitors. And then the MIT said, you won't take money from Harvard, after they never cared for engineering. And so that money remained, which kept engineering somehow as a stepchild at Harvard. So when I told the faculty in 2007, I had to go before this faculty in this very ornate room with pictures of Henry Longfellow and all these other people, and say, well, we must do this practical thing of the mechanical arts. So first of all, the schools of Harvard are really, really important. The schools of Harvard is where the deans are the most powerful, and it's the schools. The president oversees you. And each school, when you get a seal of the school, then you have. So the School of Engineering now has an approved seal, and this seal is Veritas, of course. And then I created this seal to honor our two benefactors and got the approval of the corporation, the Lawrence Family Coat of Arms, to honor Abbott Lawrence Scientific School, and Gordon McKay, the stitches of the shoe stitches, Gordon McKay, because in fact, that's worth $500 million. 40 professors, and I could change and create all kinds of professorships in fields of engineering. So when civil engineering and mechanical and science were no longer important, I could shift to computer science, I could shift to new fields of electrical engineering with no background. So these are all important parts of the history, and there were some famous donors who endowed things long time ago, which kept sort of engineering at Harvard, but as a stepchild. But now it is a full-fledged movement. Today, it's the centerpiece of the Harvard campaign. So 2007, I had to go before in a December afternoon before this faculty, IEEE Spectrum did a big article. I hate to show this picture of mine, but they wanted to show this because it has the pictures of a lot of famous people, Henry Longfellow, what do you call it, so many, William James, all of the, great this thing. And on that December afternoon, the professors gathered as usual, the faculty room, dozens of oil paintings and marble levers, William James, Henry Wadsworth, James, I said, to name a few, and to say we should do this. I said we must come full circle, and they must create a new engineering school which connects in many ways both science and society. And that was sort of, it is the ultimate liberal art, and every student at Harvard must get a feeling. If you say energy is the biggest problem facing today, what comes out of the wall socket? If I told Larry Summers, when I came as a young person to the United States in 1961 as a graduate student at Cornell, there was New York Times just had one section. Then we had an art section. Then we had a business section. Then we had a science times. Then we had electrical, literally IT sections and circuits. New York Times showed pictures of circuits when the IT revolution happened. I said, if no Harvard student can read the different sections of the New York Times, how can you say that he or she is a broadly educated person? That's the point. The technology is so central to our lives, especially because of what happened in information technology. You will not be a broadly educated person, and our undergraduates cannot treat that as a subject. This is very important for how I'll be ending. So this is sort of the message. And when the school was formally done in 2007, I also had very good committee of visitors. Tom Everhart, former president, was a chair. So I made sure I had all the backings because I had to get through 37 departments of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, and that we weren't all going to be technicians. So Yale then followed. I was the chair of the visiting committee for Yale. Yale also had an engineering which they abolished a long time ago. They were almost closing it down. Then Bromley, who had been president, came back to Yale and said, we shouldn't completely close it down. And then Brown said, they've created, Cornell always had one, and then Princeton had it for a while, and it's actually a nice engineering school. And Newell Rudenstein, who was the president of Harvard, was provost at Princeton. And he was quite instrumental, actually, in recruiting me because he realized that, in fact, this was necessary. So I want to spend now the rest of the time really on what I see as the role of engineering, and really more broadly where you think about how technology enterprises should run as a linking discipline. This I'll do just a little bit. This particular view, so one of the points is often, others have said, science is about what is. You try to understand things. You want to understand nature. Engineering often is about what it is about the imagination, one of the most creative disciplines which I know. They are the great engineers. For me, Alexander Graham Bell was really a great man, and people may not realize Graham Bell's wife was deaf, his daughter was deaf. He wanted to convert electricity into sound. He cared deeply about it. Maxwell, I was telling Tony Tyson, he actually worked for the submarine cable company in Britain. That's how he created Maxwell's equations. Not because, even though he was obviously a great person. So this connection with far-reaching applications is really, really important. Engineering is about the future. It is about what will be. It was my argument with Summers and the Board of Overseers was this one. When I was a young graduate student, nuclear magnetic resonance was a hot field. People, people had discovered this, and actually part of it was discovered at Harvard by Blomberg, Purcell, and Pound. Blomberg was a graduate student who the physics department decided was probably not good enough to be hired by them. And my predecessor of the Division of Engineering Applied, Harvey Brooks, was John Van Vleck, and Paul Martin. John Van Vleck realized the value of Blomberg and made him a professor. Gordon McGay, professor of applied physics. Now, of course, afterwards, Blomberg became a university professor, but that was the bias against anything so-called applied. But I said, you want a big, great medical school, Mr. President, that MRI machine, through which I've gone through a few times because I suffered from prostate cancer, is not a simple extension of this. This was the original MRI, and it is just not a simple extension. And in fact, this machine won the Nobel Prize in medicine given to applied physicists in electric Lauterbur and Mansfield because they understood certain very important things. from the discrete NMR to go to imaging required the gradient of the magnetic field, all of the issues of how electrical engineers think of imaging and so on, which allowed that, and you got the Nobel. That's just one example. It involved physics, computer science, everything else. Just an example. So I said, all of them will go to MIT and everywhere else, and you're talking about Harvard Medical School and biology. Then I said, I kept wanting, and I had to talk to my own faculty. If you look at the wonderful article I read in Science, the viewpoint comments on recent advances in understanding the design principle of biological network. It highlights the surprising discovery of good engineering principles in biochemistry that occurred by random tinkering. So nature, in fact, the way engineers desire systems, biology, I said, is much closer to engineering. Engineering is an integrative discipline. Physics, my field, I'm a nanoscientist, is a reductionist discipline. And in fact, the networking, synthetic biology, everybody was talking about systems biology. It's very, very close to good. And engineers can learn from the biologists as well. Very important, because this is the way I actually literally convinced my tough boss, who was a Bell Labs kind of person. I showed him the human genome, as we know, again, Steve Quake, and computing, again, computer science. I still see NIH having talks and others not recognizing all of this. Because, in fact, biology also needs to change big time because of these kind of features. And, of course, this is beginning to happen. And he was going to make this. Then we know engineering underpins the economy. Lots of economists have done studies of science and technology, and 85% of economic change occurs. And the world is dominated by the economists and rising above the gathering storm. I serve on various national committees. So these are very important elements. Because, in fact, national science policy, unless you understand how technology is done, how creative technology is happening, we will be backing the wrong horses. These are some very important, and that's really what I'm personally working on as a separate subject, not of today's lecture. And then there was the world is flat. I'm not saying everybody needs to be an engineer, but you help with that, a basic understanding of the forces that are flattening the world. If you go to China, you know how many of them are, and the way South Korea has advanced, or for that matter. So having this appreciation for technology. I work part-time at the Kennedy School now, and they are really one of the most powerful schools in the world. They literally deal with all prime ministers and presidents. I could invite people to talks there, which I could never invite even as double dean at Harvard, at the physical sciences and engineering, because we were too. I could always get Steve Chu, my friend, but if I wanted to involve the prime minister, no chance. But the Kennedy School, I can invite them. And all the politicians go through there, but none of them have an ABCD clue of not just what comes out of the wall socket. They're ruling what has happened with the Federal Communications Commission and net neutrality. They don't even know what the word frequency means. Forget about how to assign the frequencies. This is how serious the problem is. Okay, so there are two sides. The engineers have to learn about society, and the non-engineers, the politicians, the social scientists. And Harvard's biggest concentrations are economics and political science, okay? And biomedicine mainly because they go to medical school, but not for the real biologists. That's where the undergraduates go. They all become the leaders, and none of them know what comes out of the wall socket or what frequency is. We're not telling them to learn Shannon. So the reason to create an engineering school was to actually have people who understood the world of technology and the world of science and the larger societal implications, and to bring them together. And that's the message which I want to give for many. And the reason I put in the first line National Academy of Engineering, because during my time, first at Santa Barbara and then later, some of the things which the Academy was doing through its leaders, I actually believe were very good things. And I am actually now in that position, but I actually value a lot, which actually Bill Wolf and Chuck West did, because of, in fact, changing the nature of engineering education and ABET, et cetera. So this is important. So graduate education and research. So when we created the School of Engineering at Harvard, I told Larry Summers, first of all, he says, he thought he knew enough mathematics because he's an economist, and where they always think they have everything in numbers. He said, Harvard has 12,000 faculty in the medical school, which is true. We have teaching hospitals, Brigham and Women's, Mass General, and they're all great places. They've got wonderful physicians, etc. but they are not the ones who are actually doing. The medical school, which has the teaching faculty, real faculty is about 200 faculty, but he was taking 12,000. He says Faculty of Arts and Sciences has 800, and your engineering school has 60. What value is it? I said, the little guy can make a lot of difference. And I had to convince him. So how do you? He said, okay, we'll do, MIT has 350 in engineering. I said, we don't want to be 350. MIT is a great place, but because it is that size, it necessarily has to have structured departments, just like having large companies. We want to build a flexible, adaptable engineer. I have been the laboratory director at Bell Labs and Sandia and others. I've managed an engineering school at Santa Barbara. If you have about 100 faculty, you can be reasonably in touch with the faculty. And in this school, there will be no departments. All of the faculty is tenure from, and we do applied physics, we do computer science, we do electrical engineering, and we now do bio and chemical engineering. I built that up a lot. They will all be equal members of the voting faculty, and we'll vote on all cases together. The tenure will rest at the dean level, so we can actually move between disciplines. I actually believe in organizational structure, people who know and understand the business should be in charge. This is extremely important. And you need to have the broad and still be one step removed so that you're not completely caught in the day-to-day. So the design of the organization has to be right. I'm going to be writing some articles on it. And so you can do this and still have, obviously tenure is still a good thing, and that tenure will exist at the dean level, and the dean, as people retire, you won't just hire small departments replacing them exactly the same. As fields change, the one thing you know about science and engineering, they will change and evolve. And you want to have structures which can change and evolve. So this school has no departments. And I had to fight on that. But the tenure rests, so Cherry Mary, my successor, has all the powers in there, and hopefully she's smart and intelligent. So this is really the way it is to be. There's no perfect system. And then we created some centers for research. When we building, I was hired because money came from Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer. Steve Ballmer actually got his applied math degree from the then Division of Engineering and Applied Physics, and Bill Gates left in his junior year, and we all know how rich. And they told Rudenstein, get somebody who's a dean from outside. All your previous deans have been theoretical physicists, and you know, they're very distinguished people, from Van Vleck to Harvey Brooks to Paul Martin. And I was the first, so Harvard does things gradually. They brought an experimental physicist from Bell Labs to head their division to satisfy Ballmer and say, but they were good. But we started to, they said we must build computer science and electrical engineering. There was no electrical engineering because my predecessors decided semiconductor physics and those kind of things are done by places like Bell Labs, do applied research, and does not belong in a great school like Harvard. I still cannot think about this, you know, after having in charge of rights. This is really true. I'm not joking. And so we only had, even the physics department was almost forgetting to do experiments until I became Dean of Physical Sciences. We restarted all the experimental programs. Physics connects theory with experiment. But that's how distorted it can become in certain ways. So computer science, we said from the beginning, should be strongly connected. It is now matured. It doesn't have an inferior complex and have the word science after it. It really impacts almost every discipline. It's like the English language. And so I said, always it'll be like materials and other, highly interdisciplinary. We still need core computer science to understand language and so on, but connected to science. Actually, and I'll show you the consequences of it. And so we're researching. And I'm a bionic man. I have a metal knee. But we said we will do slightly different kind of engineering. This biologically inspired engineering and vice versa. And we got a very good donation from Wyss, who actually, and this actually involves a lot of faculty in the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences and Medicine and Biology, where they're doing, if you go access their website, you'll find a lot of very interesting things which they are doing. I managed to convince Kavli to give us the introduction of nanoscience and biology, and we also had, we didn't have any facility. The Center for Nanoscale Systems actually provides a lot of the integrated facilities, etc. And then on the education side, and this is what I'm going to spend the rest of my time, I have a picture of my old friend Capasso here, and the Vitruvian man, I said when I went to Harvard that we want to create the Renaissance engineer. I mean, I went to this undergraduate college where you actually, and where engineers should learn the communication skills, etc. And I think this really is important. And the alumni, including many of the arts and were very much for it because they realized the value of technology. The economists realized the value of technology. That's, in fairness to Larry Summers, he recognized the value. He just had a different view of how it should be done. And that was very important. But even Rudenstein realized it, and that's how it happened. And I want to spend a few minutes on liberal arts education. I organized at the end of my term as dean and convened. I was also on the board of Olin College, was an up-and-coming college of engineering, and others. I had Plummer from Stanford come. We had a workshop, and Princeton had always had a good, it was in a liberal arts place, like Harvard a little bit, doesn't have the professional schools, to see exactly how engineering fits in this milieu. And so I've quoted some of these from this workshop, which I chaired, and we know what the liberal arts curriculum is. Described as comprehensive study in what they call then the three branches of knowledge: humanity, the fine arts, the physical and biology and mathematics, and the social sciences. And really, to this we must of course add engineering. That's how it was defined from in other ways. So what do you need in terms of the critical skills which we came out in that workshop? I'll come to the end with the NAE or what we happened. Obviously, there's always a tension as part of the ABET between depth and breadth. I actually, long ago, even when I was dean at Santa Barbara, had written that engineering should be in some ways like a profession, and some ways like science or physics. And so in physics, master's degrees are not of great, tremendous value. Usually, either you get a bachelor's, then you go to other things, or you go and do a PhD and become like you and me. Okay? Engineering, because of the breadth of activities, we demand too much of our undergraduates, and that's why it becomes so specialized, and you've got to learn all this math. And first of all, we never even show them the exercise. That needs to change. We need the broader education, and then there are two tracks. At master's level, you really learn some of the other things after 1 to 2 years, and you become a professional engineer. You might become CEO, general manager, where you still be smart. In fact, at Santa Barbara, I created a 5-year program where for the best undergraduates who, towards their junior year, were minimum of 3.8 GPA, they could then opt for this and get a master's degree. So it was meant to be a good degree, not a flunky degree. You see, in physics and chemistry, it's a flunky degree. So the master's needs to become a really strong degree. And then those who want to be academic, they go for PhD. So that's, and there are many other ways. There may be other ways you want to do, but that's something which the field has not often thought about properly. This is still a continuing debate here, but that's what I did at Santa Barbara. And at Harvard, I said, we're very fortunate. We get such bright students. We need to expose them broadly, and they will learn the depth when they want to. That's really true. You just want to expose them and show them, because we're very fortunate with the type of students we get. So you have to obviously adjust that. Then the other thing is not to be rigid. You really want to be the future is about the flexible, adaptable engineer. It really is true, because it will change with disciplines, and you're not stuck in this one thing which you have learned. That's really the message. And so you want to actually find ways to exploit their kind of innovation skills and expose them in all of these areas: communication skills, ability to work as a member of a diverse team, and sometimes even have global knowledge and commitment. So this is really kind of the broader objectives which need to be done. And this is just not me. It is agreement among many of us, including Plummer at Stanford and Rick Miller at Olin, etc. And I had, of course, called it in one sentence when I went to Harvard: we want to educate engineers not only in how things work, but also on how the world works. Too often, we created too many technical nerds instead of the greater societal. Harvard is about producing the leaders. I said we will actually produce the leaders who will understand these things broadly, etc., etc. And the reverse is true. The social scientists need to know the other side. So that's sort of, in a one-line sentence, what I had said. So I created actually a new course. I actually want to create a concentration in technology and society. And the closest which I found is a professor at Berkeley called Richard Miller, who actually has written a text for Physics for Presidents. You see, too often the physics department had physics for poets, etc. But that's not what this is about. I start my course with actually a lot of world leaders, with what Abraham Lincoln, who created the academies of science in the midst of the Civil War. I then show them a picture of Roosevelt and then making decisions on funding the Manhattan Project. Eisenhower, who actually did Atoms for Peace. And then the one which brought me to America and makes literally goosebumps come to mind is Kennedy's speech before Rice University of why we should go to the moon. And it was a wonderful speech. I don't know, many of you have heard of it. Those who are my age should certainly have heard about it. And where he said, where people said, why should you go to the moon? He said, sometimes you've got to go to the moon and do something which is hard. It defines us as a people because, in fact, it'll change how we do certain things. It's really and defines you as a people and as a nation. And then I go to Obama and what we're trying to do with energy and environment. So we really literally, and those guys like the Kennedy School, they really become the presidents. This is not a joke. This is not a joke. And they better, so this is the course I teach. I go back to teaching it on Monday. Introduction, first lecture, I'm just showing you a couple of lectures, engineering and societal grand challenges. And of course, I show you here some of the grand challenges from the NAE. You all know energy and environment, global warming. So for example, that module, I start with some of the big engineering, the challenge there in energy, and then go to the laws of thermodynamics. So it's not, we do the thermodynamics later. They also learn how the whole system, to think of the whole. They go from the coal plant to the electricity in your home. They learn how Edison actually invented this. So it really is showing the integrated part. In fact, I like to say, James Watt invented the steam engine long before the laws of thermodynamics were known. The laws of thermodynamics came much after the steam engine because they want to make better steam engines. It's not the other way around. Physics does not always come before engineering, and engineering sometimes comes before. This is more complicated. So similarly, you've got healthcare, obviously. I have a section on national security. I'll actually show you the, and these grand challenges, I have defined them as should have several characteristics. They should be compelling. Everybody knows this is an important challenge. It may be large, relevant. There's some to our present everyday being. Feasible, timely, transdisciplinary. I actually chaired a committee of the American Academy. Actually, Linda Katehi, our chancellor, was a member of that committee, and I was surprised my good friend Tony Tyson had read this thing, and where we actually talk about transdisciplinarity. So I build in the students in my class, the social scientists, the humanities, and to do certain projects. Right now, they're doing one on cybersecurity and analyzing, in fact, Snowden's revelations. So one group has to be as if they are the NSA. One group has to be as if they are the companies like Google and all the others who now suddenly they have lost their shirt because all of this data has been compromised. And the third has to be like you and me, the public who are affected, and give different points of view, encryption, the technology part, the societal, and how you have to make the tough decisions when they become president. Because in fact, Obama is literally faced with this. That's the current project. They're going to report to me on Wednesday. So these are the 4 course modules, and right now we're doing this. I always like to think of the future, so I always have a couple of things where, in fact, they want to think about. I find the Kennedy School and the lawyers, they're so far behind the times. They can't think about the future. They're always thinking about the current. It's really frightening, and they are the leaders. We did have some great presidents who thought about it, but we've lost most of them. This is a very serious issue. We need public intellectuals who actually define this future of what we are as a nation. So this is, and so we want to actually, I show them pictures from 60 Minutes of Elon Musk, because whatever be it, because I have space, and I end with Elon Musk actually flying with SpaceX. It's actually succeeding in his car. So we need some entrepreneurs like that who actually will be thinking of actually putting men going to Mars. That seems totally far out. And but after reading the history of Bell Labs, Pierce thought about putting communication satellites long before there was a rocket, and they all laughed at him that there's no rockets. And 7 years later, there were rockets, and they actually put up satellites. So actually Elon Musk is among the few who's really doing these hard problems. Silicon Valley is great, but they're not doing the hard problems. They are doing low barrier entry with computing and so on. That, in fact, is, in that sense, Larry Summers is right. But if you've got the hard problems in biology, you've got the hard problems in energy, environment, they need the kind of action, my view. And this is where national policy has to change. You need somebody. So then you need innovators as well. So you actually, I like to define things here because I was very disappointed, and I'm a physicist, low temperature physicist, where everything in science is described as a discovery. And very often, there were new tools, there were new materials, which were actually inventions or engineered. And that was completely neglected. This including Nobel Prizes. And even though Nobel, if you read what he said, it was compromised. And this is changed now with the Swedish Academy, because increasingly we had charge-coupled devices, we had fiber optics finally entering the realm of Nobel Prizes. And Queen Elizabeth now has created a Nobel Prize, Queen Elizabeth Prize in Engineering. I sit on the search committee for it. This is a change which is definitely necessary. Sometimes it's the physicists, sometimes it's the engineers, sometimes it's the, and we really just have to realize that this excellence and creativity comes all over the place. So one of the important parts, the process of all fields have original ideas and thoughts. You can all have this. Invention has one further thing, it has some tech and is often patentable. And then innovation, however, is when actually this discovery or this invention has impacted the world more broadly. I like to say the example is like the integrated circuit. It was an invention, which also got the Nobel Prize, but it was a real innovation because that made those things practical. Thousands of them could be made. So you have to really think of all, and all of those people have to understand this, and people use many of these slightly carelessly, and it has to be thought through. So we want to create engineering innovators, creative people who think and also act as entrepreneurs. This is very important in all fields because you want, the solutions are not known. So at Harvard, I had a lot of things. I created the Idea Translation Lab. Some of you may know David Edwards, he's still there. He actually, biomedical engineering, who also writes English literature and poetry. Actually, Michael Brenner wrote to me, he said, Venky, he's the ideal person for you at Harvard, a Langer student who also can write poetry. And this guy created the art science lab. I backed him. It's not an easy matter even with my engineering colleagues. Venky is going soft. He's forgotten his physics. I'm telling you all these things. This is actually true. But I backed him up. I said, he's elected to the National Academy of Engineering. So I made sure I always brought people of impeccable credentials, so I would not be subject to, and David Edwards belonged. And he set up companies which were quite successful and so on. And we basically bring together students from arts and humanities, social science, and engineering, and all kinds of interesting projects. It's an experiment. And this is actually the Northwest building in the heart of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. And it also involves the Graduate School of Design, Harvard Institute of Global Health, etc. So this is to really bring interdisciplinary groups more with all kinds of, and lots of nice things are happening. It's just the idea of getting students to work across those boundaries and then learn to think in these ways. It's not for everybody. Some people do want much more structure, but at least they need to be exposed to this. That's the idea. So one final thing, then we can have some questions. This, for me, was one of my last acts as dean, and it has only succeeded in the last few years. Computer science, engineering faculty don't teach too many service courses. The service courses are taught by mathematics, physics, and all the others, right? Chemistry and so on. We know that. And sometimes it's a problem, because when the math people teach math, they get the kick out of proving a theorem. The applied math people teach, they get the kick out of proving a problem. In fact, can Larry Summers leave the applied mathematics alone, the math department alone, and that way you appreciate those, and now that the mathematicians are bad, it's a different yardstick. But that doesn't mean one is better than the other. So computer science, the service course for all the undergraduates was always a problem, because they'd want them to learn a lot of programming and like computer language and so on, and it would put off a lot of people. I said, let's show them the excitement of computer science and so on. And David Malin, actually he just became professor of practice. He was a student of C's, had gotten his PhD, was doing some lecturing, and the person who should teach this course, a very important course, became the dean of the faculty. And I considered the faculty, but I was discussing with the faculty to change the content of the course because the enrollments were going down, and I believe strongly in this societal. That's how this computer science was created. This man took this to heart, completely revamped the course, and today it's become the most popular course at Harvard. I cannot tell you what that means. This is Sanders Theater with a computer science course at Harvard University. It still makes 800 students listening to David Malan about computer science. These are from humanities, social sciences, etc. And he has different sets of problems. For the real computer science people, they may be a little more on Java and other things. For those who aren't, and I don't know how he does it. We still got to understand it because he's really been successful. And then he has 100 TFs because there are 800 students. And then they work in small groups. You see that TF wandering around. This is a Harvard class. Harvard has 64 undergraduates, half the 6,400 undergraduates total. In any given year, 1,600 come. 800 are going to this. Okay? So this is, and they have a fair and everything else. This is Harvard University, and this is what I mean, which is, this is impacting the education. So the enrollment in 2012, typically it had been of the order of 200. There were occasionally, in the height of the dot-com boom, there was a minor spike, but that's sort of, and then it's ever since he started teaching and we became a school, it has skyrocketed. Actually, in 2013, it's 793, 800. Essentially, half the students are taking this course. And what has happened most significantly, the number of people opting to do computer science and engineering has increased dramatically. But even more significantly, the percentage of women has gone from 10% to 40%. Computer science has been a terrible discipline for women. And for some strange region, Silicon Valley, I was discussing with one of your associate deans earlier today, is dominated by men. And I actually firmly believe that you cannot disenfranchise half the population. This has nothing to do with affirmative action or anything else. You want socially relevant engineers, and you need women. We have men who can be socially relevant. You can have women who can be nerds. But in general, you need both women and men equally or in large proportion for engineering to be a great discipline. This is really important. It's like saying man is better than woman or whatever. That's just wrong, because you need to have the larger. If you want to solve societal problems, you can't ignore half the population, period. This is very important. So it's a great thing that 40% are taking computer science, women. It helps everybody. The field is better, and these are highly motivated people. These are not people who are just picking off. So this is really, for me, really. So I think going beyond that, this is where NAE comes. Chuck West, really no more. He passed away this past year, sadly. But he actually organized, and in fact, took Miller, what are the attitudes? Can do, teamwork, core values and ethics, an insatiable appetite for learning and innovation, rage to adaptive, independent, passion to make a positive difference in the world. That's, in a sense, the labs, in a way, was like that. You know, you kind of had a passion. And then we created Duke University, USC, and Olin College, created because we had these grand challenges, which NAE, which was started under Bill Wolf and matured under Chuck West, and we are still very much doing this. We created a Grand Challenges Summit starting in 2009, where students begin to attack some grand challenge problems, which necessarily brings you into social science, whether it's environment, whether it's computing or whatever, and so on. And actually, where in fact there are certain requirements, result on a grand challenge, substantial multidisciplinary pattern involving social sciences, study abroad, a substantial goal, etc. And then you are called an NAE Grand Challenge Scholar. So these three deans, in partnership with NAE, did this, and now we have actually a Grand Challenges Summit also. Actually, we had the first one in England this past year, and we're going to have one with China next year, what the high-level problems are, etc. But this is for the students, and this is the NAE Grand Challenge Scholars Program, which really are the 5 components of the Grand Challenge: research experience, interdisciplinary curriculum, entrepreneurship, global dimension, and service learning, and an extracurricular as well as the active. And there are active 14 colleges and universities. These are currently involved. We do want to see University of California, Davis. University of California is missing, and every day I saw a campaign, but it's up to your dean. Where is Enrique? So, so this is, but there are some, Harvard is involved in various ways, by the way. So this is the 50th anniversary of the National Academy of Engineering, and it's just over there. We want to have a perpetual contract of engineering for you, which were the greatest accomplishments 50 years ago. It might be fiber optics or something else, whatever, CCDs, whatever you think of, and then what you think of 50 years down the road. And there are prizes for high school students to people like you, graduate students, etc. I don't know how they're coming in, but I like to sell that to you because I think you can all access Engineering for You website. It's a very nice little movie which actually should excite the students and since this thing. So a liberal education at Brown, which are schools where I helped form the School of Engineering, understand different, that is there, collaborate fully, apply what you have learned. That's their motto. And Princeton University, technology comes as a critical part in liberal arts education, the kind of thing which I was talking about. And then I want to show Harvard. This is what I put down as a vision. Impart a broad education by making students conversant with advances in science, train broadly educated and contribute to Harvard and the world by supporting advances in science, by spurring direct contribution to society through innovation in new technologies. So that's sort of, and so engineering at Harvard really is one where we won't have departments and where its mission will be fundamental connections to many different areas. We always have close connections with physics, earth and planetary sciences, and chemistry, et cetera. That's obviously there, FAS, and undergraduate research and discovery. Then, so all the Kennedy School now, we have quite a few. I actually have school faculty teaching at the Kennedy School. Cybersecurity is such a crying need, and they don't even know literally what an IP address means. How can we say that they don't even know how to address a computer? This is when we say we are broadly educated. This is very serious. And so we have courses in that, and obviously with medical school and law school too, because in fact the cyber area and environment area too necessarily bring technology, public policy, and law, and of course sometimes business. Because so in fact, and we have all of these schools right around us. So in fact, we are now embarking on a new campaign, and finally, the president of Harvard, Drew Faust, has put engineering at the centerpiece for that. The new campus will have engineers, and it'll be the connector, because by its very nature, it'll connect with biology and medicine and all the other things. And this is, I'm actually on a provost committee for thinking about the future of how to bring these about. These are extremely big changes, and I don't know how, I think ultimately, we are fortunate we get very bright students, that this is, I really believe, very important. The societal implications, Cold War ended, we may yet be involved with the Russians, and we will still and clearly technology will be, national security will be important, but the societal ones with energy, environment, health, etc., and cyber, it really is connected. It's so important that we need very different kind of educators on both sides. And because too often the engineers and the physicists are totally fascinated by their science or by their technology without realizing the social consequences. So, engineer in society. Thank you.
Thank you very much for an inspiring talk. Would you entertain some questions?
Sure.
Questions? Any questions?
Hi.
I got a
Yeah,
question.
go ahead.
So on your, I'm curious about this Grand Challenge Scholar Program now. Is that done as part of the BS program, or is it after the student has the BS, they go into this for a year or something?
It's part of the BS. Some of it is extracurricular, part of the BS. So certain set of students, and they have meetings regularly of the Grand Challenge students to excite them about these global problems like environment, clean water, you know,
Okay.
and so
That
on.
makes sense.
Yes.
Aside from the issue that
No, no.
apparently at Harvard it's better to leave in your junior year.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, yes, there are a few.
There are a
Yeah,
few
they
people.
say you don't need any degrees. Of course, that's true. Yes.
You mentioned the Renaissance engineer and like the importance of being flexible and being able to adapt. What advice would you give to like a PhD student who's going to be doing research in a very niche area but still like maintain the breadth that you're talking about?
So I meet with a lot of graduate students periodically because they know I've worked across. I actually, first of all, ultimately you must always do what you are passionate about. Okay, I'm passionate about this broader thing, so that should never be, whatever you are passionate about is, you need to be passionate about something. But at your graduate age, for the most average people, good students, I tell them to be always think broadly. At Bell Labs, we never wanted to hire the person who just wanted to redo his thesis. That doesn't mean the thesis is bad, but to do something new. So you want to say, if you have natural ways of collaboration, I have had PhD students for about 17 years. Throughout my deanship, I had students. I kept my lab going. And they would go to clean rooms. And now I have papers with George Whiteside, who's a well-known organic chemist, chemical engineer, because my students met George and they learned lithography and so on. And I encouraged them to do that. And now they have George Whiteside to write a reference besides me. So the point which I'm making is, make sure you get advice from other people and broaden yourself. It will only stand you in good stead. And if you have an advisor who wants to keep your nose so much to the grindstone, he might not be the right advisor for you. I really believe that. So the graduate education has to change significantly. At Santa Barbara, I have papers now with Herb Cromer and Larry Coldren. They are not my natural collaborators, unlike Art Gossett is my natural collaborator. But in the clean room they met, and we have some interesting papers. And that's very important. And similarly, so you want to expose yourself. Now, if you want to in technology and society, some people come and small number go into policy. I have undergraduates who I had one undergraduate study GPS systems at great length. And then she was very good and now has gotten really fascinated with the technology aspects. It was good to have the physics or engineering background. So what I'm saying is, when you're a student, it is a time to explore. And that's a very important part of your life. Once you finally get many jobs, you cannot explore. And this includes your graduate period, especially if you're doing a PhD. Explore. Widen your horizon. Work with others. That's my view. I don't know if others agree, but that's my view. Huh?
I totally agree, because you don't know what you will be doing
Right.
5 years from today.
Yeah. When I went from physics research lab to head the semiconductor electronics lab, my physics colleagues told me, Venky, what are you doing? You're going to an applied lab. It turned out it's the most exciting thing. I didn't realize when we put communication lasers in 1976 into the field, it was so exciting. And I didn't realize that I would be excited by that. I was working with superfluid helium. Doing something different can be quite exciting.
Yes.
I saw that global awareness and global education theme came across in several slides. Could you share with us some of the plans that Harvard has of exposing these students to globalization and global awareness?
So there are
Is it study abroad? Is it service learning? What
there are a lot,
are your plans?
and a lot of it has to happen. Some of them have to happen extracurricular, like sort of different answer to Tony Tyson's question. Namely, I'll give you some examples. Brazil has very strong programs in energy and environment. They happen to be a country with great natural resources, or like US, and very strong. They created flex fuels and so on. So, and we have a Latin American program at Harvard. I first got a joint thing with the School of Engineering at University of Sao Paulo, where actually, alternately in J term, which is the January term, a group of Harvard undergraduates go to Sao Paulo, or a group of Brazilian undergraduates come to Harvard and get exposed to what they are doing. And that has led to some new faculty collaborations. We're doing a couple of these things with India and also with China. And these are fairly expensive in the sense because it is both because of costs and other features and so on. But we need to do, and with China we do a lot because we have very strong relations with China. There's Harvard with an infrastructure because the students need, and so in the summertime, many of them for global things working with companies in China, in India, we place them, and where we begin to develop offices because they still need some support. There still needs to be a Harvard person, you're responsible, students can get into trouble, and so there are all these features. But the answer is, global part is an important part. It's not a curricular requirement, but it is highly, people do go for January terms. I've even had a faculty member from here go and teach at IIT Mumbai, an American, a white American, not an Indian like me, and vice versa, because some of them want to do it, including in China.
Very exciting presentation, Venky.
Yeah.
So the Renaissance engineer, will she graduate from an ABET accredited program?
So at Harvard, we have two programs. You can get an SB degree, which has somewhat more, I would say, math and engineering requirements, or you can get an AB degree, which allows you to take more of the liberal courses. And there are a large number who take AB and some who take the SB. And AB is, of course, not us. And we are very fortunate. I mean, these are, because they are Harvard students, they just do just fine. They're right. But so we do have, in fact, there is, engineering is the only one which has an SB. It's like the BS at Harvard. Everybody else gets an AB. Okay? So in computer science, it's only an AB. Okay.
But if we were to extend this concept of the Renaissance engineer to non-Harvard programs, how do we practically go about creating an infrastructure that allows for accreditation, that allows for someone's stamp of approval? How do we do that?
So I think, first of all, in computer science, it's very common, even at Santa Barbara, to get either an AB degree or a BS degree. In computer science, this is very common. Take advantage of that. Let's start somewhere. In computer science, we need a lot more women. Just an example, even on minorities, okay? And if you get a lot more women, you'll automatically get more minorities and everything else. That's just an example, because it's not subjected to the engineering accreditation. Second, I actually believe that's why some places should create this unique master's type of programs and take the lead. Some good places can afford to take lead. Berkeley can afford to do things. MIT can, because hell with ABET, because, and so on. It may not be possible for everyone. Even at Harvard, I was reluctant to completely give up the ABET accredited SP degree because some people want it. So I kept that option open, even though my visiting committee said, forget ABET, you're Harvard University. But I said, we are not Harvard University for engineering. I still want ABET. So I'm just telling you how I reacted. I'm a pragmatic person. So you want to find ways. In biomedical, we have an AB degree. There's not an ABET accredited, but the students have no problem. And I think University of California in general has a pretty, there are some places which will close the door, but they're not looking at the future. The broad-minded person will ask the student the right questions, what have you asked? So, but I think this is something, at the same time, we need to put pressure on ABET to keep changing their things as well. And we all should collectively, engineering deans meet, engineering deans council, they should be putting those pressures so that we change. And that's why creating the Ivy Leagues is a very important. All 7, 8 Ivy Leagues, Cherry Murray is working with them. So we create this brand of Ivy engineer, which will carry a lot of weight. And there are a lot of schools in there, good schools with good students, which produces Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos and all these guys. We need to change. It has to start somewhere. Am I being clear? Yes. So it's not a simple thing, of course. Not a simple thing.
Last question? No?
Yeah, there's a lady. There's a lady. There's a lady asking. Yeah.
I was just curious, how would you think about integrating some general liberal arts knowledge to focused undergrad engineering schools?
So I think the first year, that requires a lot of how we teach. Too often, they did not take things like design. So we created several new courses, actually, engineering science 1 of 50, which showed them the breadth of it. Because too often, people were leaving. Because in Harvard, especially now, you don't declare your major till your sophomore, till the middle of your sophomore year. So a year and a half, and you better somehow get to them. And what has happened is from 400 concentrators now, you've gone to 800, which is really about 12 or 15%, which is already quite a lot for Harvard. So that means the early courses now are having impact. In fact, that's a serious problem, irrespective of AB and SB, that we must have the interact. And this is true for physics too. We still so often teach them with inclined planes. Eric Mazur will give you which is such a nightmare. So showing them lasers and all the exciting thing which physics came out, and then they will learn about the forces and the inclined planes. This is nothing to do with even what I said. We just have to modernize ourselves. So have I answered part of your question? So I hope Davis has some very good introductory courses available. At Harvard, we've been working hard exactly for that reason, both in terms of early experiential design, that's true for Olin, and also some very general electrical engineering and bio courses, combining these and showing them. I had a hard struggle. I said, we don't have departments. They need to learn waves and motions, but in the fluid mechanics, people treat it as one way, the electricity environment another way. It's the same differential equation. We just change the thinking. Let's begin to think a little bit, and it also saves the teaching resources. So how it is organized needs to be debated. Then you can free up some resources to teach the kind of courses this young lady wants.
Thank you very much.
Not all.
There is a small gift from the college.
Oh.
Venky likes Yankees. so even though it's not.
I lived in New Jersey, and even though Red Sox and Yankees are blood enemies, and I'm 18 years in Boston, I'm still a Yankee fan. I still.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.